The heat that day was a physical presence. You could feel its weight pressing down on your shoulders, silencing the birds and baking the very air you breathed. The only sound was the dry, electric hum of cicadas, a noise so constant it became a part of the silence. I was sitting by my pool, the cool concrete a small mercy against my bare feet. The water was a perfect, undisturbed sheet of turquoise, mirroring the cloudless, unforgiving sky. On the wall behind it was my mural, my pride and joy. It wasn't some wild splash of color. It was a map, a story. Layers of deep blue, earthy ochre, and pale gray depicted the network of aquifers running deep beneath our town, a hidden world of water that my father, a geologist, had spent his life charting. We hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since the fight that left a silence colder than any stone, but his work was etched into my mind. This mural was my tribute, my way of making the invisible visible. That's when the sound came. Not the cicadas, but a harsh, metallic screech. The gate to my backyard was thrown open with a violence that made me flinch. 3 figures stood there, silhouetted against the blinding sun. The man in the middle stepped forward, Mr. Harrison, president of our Homeowners Association. He was a man built of soft edges and hard opinions, with a smile that never reached his eyes. The 2 men flanking him were dressed in identical polo shirts with some generic code enforcement logo. They moved with a stiff, robotic purpose. Harrison didn't say hello. His eyes scanned my yard with a look of profound disappointment, as if my peaceful corner of the world was a personal insult to him. Then, his gaze landed on the mural. He pointed a fleshy finger. "That," he said, his voice cutting through the heat. "That is an unapproved commercial advertisement. It's a violation of Section 12, Paragraph 4. I just stared at him. An advertisement? I almost laughed. An advertisement for what, Harrison? Ground? He ignored me, his small eyes glittering. He was enjoying this. You have 48 hours to paint it over, standard white or beige. He turned to one of his goons. Document it. The man pulled out a phone and began snapping pictures, the synthetic click of the shutter sounding like a weapon in the quiet yard. The other pulled out a tape measure and began measuring the distance from the mural to the fence line, a piece of pure, pointless theater. My hand went to my pocket, my fingers closing around the cool, heavy weight of the old geodetic token my father had given me when I was a kid, a brass disc stamped with a survey marker. It was a symbol of his life's work, of precision, of facts. Everything this moment was not. This is a piece of art, Harrison, I said, my voice low. It was funded by a grant from the Arts Council. He actually did laugh then, a short barking sound. The Arts Council doesn't write our rules. This is a private community with standards. He glanced at his wrist, at a heavy gold watch with a small dark blue logo I couldn't quite make out. It was a weirdly specific detail, that watch. It looked expensive and out of place. The fine is $5,000. It'll be delivered to your door. You know how it is. If you're watching Karenology, you know it's never about the mural. It's about control. It's about the small bit of power someone has, and their desperate need to use it on someone else. I stood up slowly. I'm over 50 and I've spent my life as a logistics coordinator for emergency situations, floods, hurricanes, wildfires. I've stared down chaos you wouldn't believe. I know a manufactured crisis when I see one, and this felt manufactured. You're making a mistake, I said, keeping my voice even. No, he replied, a thin, satisfied smile spreading across his face. The mistake was yours when you decided your art was more important than the rules everyone else follows. He turned and walked away, his inspectors following like well-trained dogs. I didn't watch them go. My eyes were fixed on the formal violation notice he'd slapped onto my front door on his way in. The white paper glowed in the afternoon sun, a stark rectangle against the dark wood. It wasn't just a fine. It was a countdown. That white paper stared at me for the rest of the afternoon, a glaring middle finger from across the yard. 48 hours. Have you ever been given a deadline that wasn't about the task, but about your surrender? That's what it felt like. This wasn't a request. It was a demand to bend the knee. I've spent my life dealing with logistics and disasters, where every decision has immediate, life or death consequences. This felt small, petty, and yet, somehow, just as suffocating. My first move was to play by the book. I dug out the paperwork for the grant. $10,000 from the County Arts Council. It wasn't just funding, it was an endorsement. It came with a letter praising the mural for its unique blend of artistic expression and local environmental education. I scanned it, attached it to a polite but firm email to the entire Homeowners Association board, and laid out the facts. I explained the grant, the public-facing nature of the art, and respectfully requested they rescind the fine. I hit send and felt a small, foolish flicker of hope. Maybe logic would prevail. The reply came in less than 10 minutes. It was from Harrison and him alone. "Thank you for your correspondence." It began, dripping with corporate politeness. "The board considers the matter closed. The aesthetic code is separate from any outside funding. Please be reminded that the compliance deadline is firm. Further emails on this topic will not receive a response." It was a digital slam of the door in my face. The other board members were either with him or too scared to speak up. So much for logic. The next morning, the heat was even worse. The air felt thick, like you were breathing through a wool blanket. I was out front, watering the one sad-looking rose bush my wife had planted before she passed, trying to keep it alive against the drought. That's when a pristine white pickup truck from the county water department pulled up. A man in a crisp uniform got out, a clipboard in his hand. He had the weary, over-it expression of every bureaucrat I've ever met. He walked right up to me. "Sir, we've had a report of excessive water consumption at this address." He didn't introduce himself. He just stated his purpose like a machine. I looked at the trickle of water coming from my hose. "Excessive? I'm trying to save a plant. Look around, the whole county is turning to dust." He wasn't interested in conversation. "We're in a stage 3 drought," he said, his pen scratching on his clipboard. "We've registered an anomalous spike in your usage over the past month. It's consistent with filling a large swimming pool multiple times." "I haven't filled my pool in a year," I shot back. "The water level is down 6 inches from evaporation. Go look for yourself." He didn't even glance toward the backyard. "The meter doesn't lie, sir." He tore a sheet off his clipboard. It was another fine, $1,500. "You can contest it at the county office. Have a nice day." He turned and walked back to his truck, the engine rumbling to life and leaving a puff of exhaust in the thick, hot air. I stood there, 2 pieces of paper now defining my life. One from the Homeowners Association for a mural they didn't like, and one from the county for water I hadn't used. It was too much of a coincidence. It was a coordinated attack. One targeted my property, the other my resources. They weren't just trying to make me paint a wall. They were trying to bleed me dry. I looked down the street, and for a second, I thought I saw Harrison's car, parked at the far end of the block, just a dark shape shimmering in the heat haze before it pulled away. The feeling of being watched, of being targeted, settled in my gut like a cold stone. This wasn't just a dispute with the Homeowners Association anymore. It was a siege. Harrison had allies, and they were playing a game with rules I didn't know. My next stop was the county office, a beige, soulless building that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. I waited an hour to speak to a clerk who looked at my water bill with profound indifference. "The reading is the reading," she said, not making eye contact. "You can file a dispute, but it will take 6 to 8 weeks to get an inspector out to check the meter. Until then, the fine stands." 6 to 8 weeks. By then, Harrison's fines would have snowballed into a mountain of debt. It was a perfect bureaucratic trap. Defeated, I walked back to my car. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the neighborhood social media group. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. Harrison had posted a picture. It was a photo of my water meter, the dial showing a high reading. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive poison. "A friendly reminder to all our neighbors to conserve water during this critical drought," he wrote. "While most of us are making sacrifices, some feel the rules don't apply to them. Let's all do our part to protect our community resources, even if it means sacrificing personal luxuries like filling private pools for art projects." The comments section was a bonfire. Disgusting. Who does he think he is? My lawn is dead, and this guy is wasting water? People I'd known for years, people I'd shared beers with, were turning on me. They didn't have the facts, just Harrison's perfectly crafted narrative. He wasn't just attacking my wallet. He was turning my community against me. He was isolating me, painting me as the villain in a story he wrote. I drove to the one place I could think of, a small, dark bar on the edge of town called the salty dog. The owner, Jim, was an old friend. He was a big man with a quiet way about him, a guy who saw and heard everything. He was wiping down the bar when I came in, the place cool and dark after the glare of the sun. He slid a glass of ice water toward me without a word. "Rough day?" he asked. "You have no idea," I muttered, and told him everything. The mural, the fines, the water inspector, the social media post. He listened, his expression grim. When I was done, he sighed and leaned on the bar. "Be careful, man," he said, his voice low. "Harrison's been cozying up to some powerful people lately. A guy from a development company called AquaCorp has been in here with him a few times. They're buying up land out by the old East Farms." He paused, looking me straight in the eye. "People are angry about the water, Maya. Really angry. You're the face of the problem now, whether it's fair or not." My phone buzzed again. It was my neighbor Kevin, a kid in his early 20s who was a wizard with computers. A message popped up. "Hey, I saw the post. That's messed up. I think I can help. I can get into the county's water usage database. Let's see what the meter is really saying." A sliver of hope cut through the despair. Evidence. Hard data. It felt like the first real weapon I'd had in this fight. "Do it," I texted back, my heart pounding a little faster. If the data showed my usage was normal, I could expose Harrison's lie. I could clear my name. But as I sat there in the cool darkness of the bar, a different, colder thought surfaced. What if the data proved him right? The wait for Kevin's message was agonizing. I went home and paced my living room, the silence of the house amplifying every anxious thought. What would you do if you were cornered like that? When the system is designed for you to fail and your neighbors think you're the bad guy. It's a lonely place to be. Finally, my phone pinged. I snatched it up. It was a screenshot from Kevin, a graph of my water usage for the past 30 days. My stomach dropped. The graph showed a clear, undeniable pattern of massive spikes in water consumption. They happened almost every night, between 2 and 4 in the morning, pulling hundreds of gallons at a time. The data didn't exonerate me. It condemned me. "Dude, this is bad," Kevin's text read. "It looks like your pool's autofill system is broken and has been running wild every night. The meter isn't lying." I felt the air leave my lungs. A broken autofill. It was plausible. It was a simple mechanical failure. It meant Harrison was right. It meant the county was right. It meant I was the problem. The anger and defiance drained out of me, replaced by a wave of crushing humiliation. I had been so sure I was being framed, so convinced of my own righteousness, but the data was the data. I walked out to the pool, the heat of the evening still clinging to the air. The mural, my beautiful map of hidden water, now seemed like a monument to my own arrogance. I had been so busy fighting a phantom conspiracy that I hadn't even checked the most obvious possibility. I thought about the angry comments online, the disappointed look on Jim's face. They were all justified. The next morning, Harrison called an emergency meeting of the Homeowners Association. He didn't have to. I knew what I had to do. I had to apologize. I had to pay the fines, paint over the mural, and accept my defeat. The fight was over. But as I was getting ready to leave, my eyes fell on the graph Kevin had sent me again. I zoomed in on the timestamps. 2:07 a.m., 3:15 a.m., 2:40 a.m. Something about it felt off. It wasn't the regular, predictable cycle of a mechanical failure. The timings were too random. And then another detail surfaced in my memory, something I'd pushed aside. That gold watch on Harrison's wrist at my house. The dark blue logo. I'd seen it before, in the bar, with the developer, AquaCorp. Why was the head of our Homeowners Association wearing a watch from a development company? It was a tiny, insignificant detail, a loose thread in a story that was otherwise wrapped up. I should have ignored it. I should have gone to that meeting and surrendered. But my whole life has been about finding the one detail that doesn't fit the pattern, the one piece of the puzzle that's been forced into the wrong place. And that watch was a piece that just didn't belong. I grabbed my keys, but I didn't head to the community center for the meeting. I was heading in the opposite direction, toward the library archives. It was a long shot. A desperate move, based on nothing but a hunch. But it was the only move I had left. I had to find out what AquaCorp was and what they wanted with our town. The library was an oasis of cool, quiet air. The archives were in the basement, a place that smelled of old paper and forgotten stories. I spent 2 hours scrolling through microfiche of old county planning documents and business registries. At first I found nothing. AquaCorp was just another faceless development company, buying up cheap agricultural land east of town. It all seemed above board. But my job is to see the whole map, not just the pieces. I started cross-referencing their land purchases with old geological surveys, and that's when I found it. The lands AquaCorp was buying sat directly on top of the largest, most accessible part of the aquifer, the very same one depicted on my mural. They weren't buying farmland, they were buying water rights. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a live stream link to the Homeowners Association meeting. I clicked it, my heart pounding. Harrison was at the podium, his face a mask of grave concern. "My friends, my neighbors," he began, his voice resonating with false sincerity. "We are in a crisis. The drought is not ending. Our community's wells are at risk, but I have a solution." He gestured to a large screen behind him. A slick corporate logo appeared. AquaCorp. AquaCorp has generously offered to build a private pipeline, connecting our community to their vast private water reserves. It will guarantee our water supply for decades to come. A murmur of relief went through the crowd. He had them. He had created the panic, and now he was selling the cure. "Of course," he continued, "this security comes at a cost. A one-time special assessment of $20,000 per household." The room erupted, shouts of anger and disbelief, but Harrison raised his hand for silence. "It is a small price to pay for our future, and it is necessary because some among us have been recklessly wasting our precious resources." He put my water usage graph on the screen, my name, my address. The crowd's anger instantly redirected toward me. I was the scapegoat, the reason their savings were about to be wiped out. The vote was a landslide. The project was approved. I felt sick. It was a perfect con. He had used me to create a panic, then sold the solution to the very company he was working for. The fines, the social media shaming, it was all part of the plan to make his pipeline proposal seem not just reasonable, but necessary. And I had almost fallen for it. I left the library, my mind racing. What could I do? The vote was done. The contracts would be signed. I drove home under a bruised-looking twilight sky. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw it. My internet cable, which ran from the pole to my house, had been cut. A clean snip. I was cut off, isolated. No phone, no internet. Just me and the four walls of my house. I walked into my backyard and stood before the mural. In the dim light, the blues and grays looked like a deep, silent wound on the wall. The whole world thought I was a fool and a villain. I was facing tens of thousands of dollars in fines and fees. I was alone. Have you ever felt that? Like you're at the bottom of a well, and the only light you see is the one that's about to be switched off? I leaned against the cool wall, the painted stone pressing into my back, and for the first time in this whole fight, I felt the crushing weight of utter defeat. I closed my eyes. The old geodetic token in my pocket felt impossibly heavy, a relic from a life where facts mattered. Tonight, they didn't. Tonight, the lie had won. That night was the longest of my life. The silence in the house was absolute, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. Being cut off from the world does something to you. It shrinks your reality down to what you can see and touch. I sat in the dark, the heavy brass token in my hand, turning it over and over. My father gave it to me when I decided not to follow him into geology. "Facts are useless if you can't connect them to people," he'd said, his voice laced with disappointment. We hadn't spoken in 3 years because of it. Now, his words echoed in the silent house. I had the facts, AquaCorp, the land purchases, Harrison's connection. But what good were they? The community had already made its decision, fueled by fear and misinformation. I couldn't fight a lie with a spreadsheet. I had to show them. I had to connect the facts to their lives. And then, an idea sparked in the darkness. It was crazy. It was a huge risk. But it was the only thing I had left. My expertise wasn't just in finding problems. It was in stress testing systems, finding the breaking point. Well, this whole town was a system, and I was about to run a stress test. The next morning, before the sun was up, I drove to a 24-hour superstore. I bought every bottle of blue food coloring they had on the shelves, dozens of them. Then I went to an electronics supply and bought a cheap drone, the kind a kid would get for his birthday, with a simple camera. Back at home, under the cover of the pre-dawn gloom, I started my work. I dumped all the food coloring into my pool. The turquoise water turned a shocking, almost radioactive shade of cobalt blue. It looked like a gaping wound in the earth. It was beautiful. Then I found Kevin, the young hacker from next door. I showed him the drone. "I need you to be my eyes in the sky," I told him, explaining my plan. He looked at the pool, then at me, and a slow grin spread across his face. "This is either genius or the dumbest thing I've ever seen," he said. "I'm in." The problem was the nightly water loss. The data said I was losing hundreds of gallons every night, but where was it going? It wasn't a leak into the ground. The soil around the pool was bone dry. It had to be going somewhere else. Someone wasn't just letting the water run, they were actively draining it. And I was willing to bet it was happening through a dedicated pipe, one that wasn't on any public map. As night fell, Kevin launched the drone. Its small propellers whirred to life, a quiet buzz in the tense air. It climbed high above the neighborhood, a tiny red light blinking in the vast darkness. He had it hovering over my property, its camera feeding directly to his laptop. We waited. The hours crawled by. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., nothing. The deep blue water of my pool remained perfectly still. I started to think I was wrong, that this whole insane plan was just a final, desperate act of a man who'd lost. Then, at 2:37 a.m., Kevin whispered, "Showtime." On his screen, the water level in my pool began to drop. Slowly at first, then faster. We couldn't see how, but the water was disappearing. "I'm sending the drone out," Kevin said, his fingers flying across the controls, following the city's main water lines. The drone zipped through the night, its camera scanning the dark, sleeping streets. It followed the main trunk line east toward the edge of town, and then it saw it, a small, unmarked access road leading to a fenced-off area. In the center of the enclosure was a fire hydrant. And from that hydrant, a torrent of vivid, unmistakable cobalt blue water was gushing out, pouring into a massive, open-topped tanker truck with the AquaCorp logo emblazoned on its side. They weren't just stealing my water, they were collecting it. The image on Kevin's laptop was my smoking gun. It was irrefutable. It was perfect. We had them. For a moment, I felt a surge of pure, triumphant rage. I wanted to call the sheriff. I wanted to send the video to every news station in the state. I wanted to watch Harrison get dragged away in handcuffs. But then my father's words echoed in my head again. Facts are useless if you can't connect them to people. A police report would get buried. A lawsuit would take years. The community wouldn't see justice. They'd see more paperwork. I had to deliver the truth not to a judge, but to the people whose trust Harrison had stolen, and I knew exactly where to do it. The salty dog was packed. It was Friday night, and half the neighborhood was there, trying to drink away the anxiety of the $20,000 bill that was coming their way. Harrison was in the corner booth, holding court, basking in the glow of his victory. He was laughing, a glass of expensive-looking whiskey in his hand. He looked like a king on his throne. I walked in. The chatter died down as heads turned. The air grew thick with tension. I could feel their resentment, their blame. To them, I was the cause of all this. I didn't say a word. I walked straight to the bar, where Jim was watching me with wide, cautious eyes. "Jim," I said, my voice loud enough to carry through the suddenly quiet room. "Line up a round of Blue Lagoons for everyone, on my tab." Then I pulled out my phone and placed it on the bar, the screen facing out. I hit play. The video started, the drone's view of my cobalt blue pool, then the shot of the water level dropping, the flight through the dark streets, the fenced-off compound, and finally, the money shot. The torrent of my blue water pouring from a public hydrant into a private AquaCorp tanker. A collective gasp went through the room. I picked up a small vial of the same blue food coloring from my pocket. I walked over to Harrison's table. He was frozen, his face a ghastly shade of pale, his whiskey glass halfway to his lips. I uncapped the vial. "You look thirsty, Harrison," I said, my voice dangerously calm. I tipped the vial, and a single perfect drop of cobalt blue spiraled down into his amber whiskey, instantly turning it a sickly, swampy green. "You're drinking the evidence," I said. "You manufactured a drought by draining my pool every night. Then you sold everyone the cure from the very company that was stealing our water. You didn't just lie to them. You made them pay for it." No one moved. The only sound was the hum of the beer cooler. Every eye in that bar was on Harrison, not me. Him. His authority, his carefully constructed image as the town's savior, evaporated in that single moment. The king was naked. He didn't say a word. He just stood up, his chair scraping loudly on the floor, and walked out, the entire bar watching his retreat. The door swung shut behind him, leaving a profound and satisfying silence. There was no need for the police. The Homeowners Association imploded the next day. The deal with AquaCorp was dead on arrival, and Harrison disappeared, rumored to have moved 2 states over. I got an offer to take his place as president of the board, a chance to be the one in charge. I turned it down. I didn't want the power. I just wanted the truth to matter again. The biggest price I paid? It was my comfortable cynicism. I had built a wall around myself, convinced that people were selfish and communities were a fiction. But in that bar, I saw something else. I saw neighbors looking at each other, the anger replaced with a dawning sense of shared purpose. I had lost my quiet, lonely peace, but maybe, just maybe, the town had found its voice. A few days later, a familiar beat-up truck pulled into my driveway. My father got out. He was older, grayer, but he stood just as straight. He walked into my backyard and stood beside me, looking at the mural. The pool was back to its normal color, the blue dye long since dissipated. He didn't say anything about our fight. He didn't apologize, and neither did I. He just looked at the painted wall, my map of his world. Then, he reached into his truck and pulled out his old rock hammer, the wooden handle worn smooth from a lifetime of use. He held it out to me. I looked at the hammer, then at the geodetic token still in my pocket. I took the hammer from his hand. It was a truce, an understanding. Facts were good, but connecting them was better. I hadn't just won a fight over a mural. I had found my way back home. And if you've ever felt disconnected from something you love, you'll know that's a victory worth any price. If you get what I'm saying, hit that like button and let me know.